everyone, and welcome to the Babies in Common Show. I'm Jeanette.
I'm Melissa, and today is Wednesday, July 1st, 2020, and we will be discussing childproofing, why it's important, more important than you think, and even why it's not okay to think that it's just not going to happen to you.
Yes, and our special guest is Kimberly Amato. Kim's a physical therapist, CPR instructor, retired childbirth educator, and retired birth doula, founder of Meghan's Hope, which is an organization that raises awareness about furniture tip-over and advocates for stronger furniture safety laws. She's also the author of Out of the Darkness, coping with and recovering from the death of a child, and she's also a childproofing and child safety advocate. She lives in central Massachusetts with her husband, with whom she does ballroom dance competitions when it's not a pandemic, and she has 2 almost grown boys. And you can learn more about furniture tip-over on Kim's website, meganshope.org, as well as by listening to the rest of this interview. So thanks for joining us, Kim. I haven't seen you in a long time, but it's great to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Now, my first question I have to ask Kim is what type of ballroom dancing? What dance is your specialty? Do you like the samba, the merengue? What do you like?
It changes from time to time. My current favorite is the foxtrot.
Oh, okay. Excellent.
But we do all 9 American dances. So
that's wonderful. Maybe we'll see you on Dancing with the Stars one day.
Probably not. But if Max or Derek call me, I'm on.
All right. So today's topic is going to be a more serious topic, but nonetheless, still something that's very important to talk about. I'd like to start off by talking about some child safety statistics. So first off, injury is the leading cause of death in children and young adults. According to the Centers for Disease Control, approximately 12,000 children and young adults ages 1 to 19 years die from unintentional injuries each year. In fact, each year, about 2,000 children ages 14 and under die as a result of a home injury. Unintentional home injury deaths to children are caused primarily by fire and burns, suffocation, drowning, firearms, falls, choking, and poisoning. Falls are the leading cause of non-fatal injury to children. Children ages 19 and under account for about 8,000 fall-related visits to the hospital emergency rooms every day. And since we're filming this in the summer, this is a very important point to make, that drowning is the leading cause of unintentional injury-related death among children ages 1 to 4. The majority of drownings and near drownings occur in residential swimming pools and in open water sites. However, children can drown in as little as 1 inch of water. So thank you, Kim, for helping us unpack this really important topic.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So Kim, we go way back, and we were both doulas and childbirth educators, and we had little children at the time. And you're now a physical therapist and working with high-risk populations in assisted livings. So very, very different life than you had back then, but you're still a very large, like a big advocate for children's safety, and you'll talk more about what exactly you're doing. But what I wanted to chat about first, it's hard to pick a thing that we talk about first, but in a way, I think most parents think about choking as maybe the first childproofing thing that they do, besides thinking about their crib for their baby or where their baby's sleeping. They think about introducing foods and what's my baby going to possibly choke on. And I know you used to teach CPR and child safety classes. So can you explain the difference between gagging and choking? Because I have a lot of parents that talk about how they're nervous about the baby-led weaning or baby-led food introduction that we talk about a lot. And what's the difference between those two?
Excellent question. So I think the simplest way to explain it is that gagging is anything that triggers your gag reflex. So, it's that food goes down the wrong way kind of thing, or liquid goes down the wrong way kind of thing. It usually stimulates a cough. And coughing is good. So, I actually gagged earlier today.
Right? Isn't that funny? You own your mouth your whole life, and you still you can gag and you bite your cheek and you're like, I've had that my whole life. Why is that?
Exactly. But you drink and you laugh at the same time or something, right? So I would say, gagging is just something stimulates your gag reflex. For some people, it's just seeing something gross and it makes you, kind of thing. It can be brushing your teeth and getting the toothbrush too far back for, folks who do that. So I think even in babies, gagging is just, it's a fact of life. It's going to happen. Not something necessarily to be concerned about. Choking is an airway obstruction. So when I teach when I teach CPR classes, we talk about choke saving, and we talk about recognizing signs of choking. And the first thing I always say is, if you think your baby or child or even an adult is choking, stop and pay attention, right? So if they've got food in front of them, take it away. If they're lying down, gently help them sit up. And if they're coughing, don't touch them. Let them cough. Because sometimes we pick them up and we instinctively want to pat them on the back, and that, if they are choking, that can actually make the object get stuck. So as long as they're actively coughing and passing air, let them be. If you're worried, call 911. Because no EMT has showed up and said, I can't believe you called. Everything's fine.
Yeah, I remember even like 10 years ago, I feel like most families knew that taking a CPR class was a good idea before they had a baby or soon after they had a baby. And since then, it's like it's hardly ever taught. Parents who do think about it, like, where do I even get that class? And I've sometimes searched for them. There's very, very few available. And I remember learning that in my first CPR class years ago, that if someone's coughing, then you don't hit them on their back, which is what we grow up.
Oh yeah, it's like the Italian grandmother. You get a big whack, right?
And it's like, sit on your hands, you're coughing, it's good. But I definitely know, like, a lot of moms in particular, I'll speak to moms in particular, they tell me that they're trying to do baby-led weaning, and so they're giving their baby these large chunks of food to start to nibble on just as they're trying to get used to food around 6 months or older. And their partner is like, oh no, we're not doing that. Oh, that's too scary. I want to do purees. And you can still gag on a puree too, so it's not going to prevent the gagging. Clearly you want to be with the children.
But when babies are young, you want them to pace themselves, because they're like, ooh, yay, fistful of whatever's in front of them, and it all goes in. Whether it's
that happens when they're 7-year-old boys too. I just want to point that out.
I don't know. You could look at some 45-year-old men.
But it's also providing food cut up so it's small enough that it's not going to obstruct their airway if they do end up having it go down the wrong pipe. A lot of times it's the consistency too. So things like nut butters, or things that are thick, or that they kind of chew and store in their cheek, and then they swallow that large mass of mushy whatever it was, even bananas, right? So if whatever's in their mouth is big enough to obstruct their airway, it has the potential for them to choke on it. So we can control that a little bit by controlling what we're giving them to eat and how big those pieces are and how much they're getting at once. The other big thing for parents of, toddlers or children who are mobile is try to start very young. Don't let them move with food. Because walking around the house while they're chewing on something, they're much more likely to or fall, or have it happen when you don't even know that it's happening.
Right. And then you're like, oh, they've been playing so nicely over there in the corner.
They're so quiet. Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And it happens for sure. So those are the best ways to prevent choking. If you feel your child is choking, and the way you can tell is they're not making sound, there's no air movement, they're not coughing, they may be, kind of trying to, but there's no sound coming out, or they're, ooh, you hear that high-pitched, like air's getting through, but not much. Or sometimes they'll just sit and stare, especially if they're older. They don't know what to do, so they just sit quietly, and you wouldn't know anything was wrong.
Yeah, that's scary.
Yeah, and then obviously you call 911 at that point.
Yeah.
And obviously take a CPR class for your kids, because there are, the back wax and the
Yes.
chest
Yes,
thrusts,
knowing
you
what
can
to
learn
do
if
is
someone is absolutely, if they are choking. It's important, and it's important for grandparents too, just as
oh,
you
absolutely.
mentioned that there's an outdated way to you should not deal with somebody who is choking.
You put your arms up.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Put your arms up, put your arms
I say to
up.
people, what does that do? And they go, I don't know. My grandmother told me to do
My
it.
grandmother told me to
Don't put your arms
absolutely.
up. Is what it means. Because
It doesn't do anything.
Oh my gosh, that's true. Now, Kimberly, are there any foods in particular that even if they are, prepared in small pieces by the parent, that they're just too dangerous and can be a big choking hazard? I mean, nuts is one that I know of. Are there any others that maybe people don't realize? Peanut butter, I think, is interesting because especially with people who have more than one child, the baby kind of eats everything the bigger kids is eating sometimes, even if you don't intend it. But the fact that it's very sticky, that makes sense. You can get something stuck in the back of your throat and, not be able to swallow it. So anything else like that?
Right. And it's not that they can't have it. It's just, teeny tiny little bits at a time, and make
Under
sure
supervision.
you cover it before you give them the next piece. Anything round, really. I mean, when you think about, a young child's airway is probably about the diameter of their finger. So if you think of it that way, 2 fingers at most, but most little ones, right? So people say, oh, I'll cut those hot dogs in half. No, they really need to be quarters. Grapes need to be in quarters. And if they're big grapes, even smaller, right? So it's just whatever it is, it needs to be smaller than the diameter of a finger.
Well, that being said, though, with the baby-led weaning, a lot of times we're talking about doing foods that are stick shape, that are the length of a finger, so a baby can grab them, but they're not meant to be so easily chewed off that they would stay in that shape, right? So it's sort of like the consistency of that stick shape in baby-led weaning, so to speak, quote unquote baby-led weaning, is a very different thing than what you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
And you just have to be mindful. It's not so much what they're eating, it's are they able to manage it in their mouth effectively? And some may be able to do it with some foods and not others. Some may never have a problem. If you notice they're coughing every time they eat a certain food, that might be a sign that that's a difficult food for them to manage for whatever reason. Or sometimes it could even be maybe an early sign of an allergy, that they're spitting it out and I don't like it.
Or that you're introducing food too early.
That could be too.
And some babies still have a really major thrust.
That's
true. They're protecting their airway by thrusting their tongue. And so if every food you give them, they're thrusting it out, they're probably not ready. Even if they're 6 months old, they may still not be ready for food yet. So let them play with it and move it around on their tray maybe, but you don't need to make sure they're eating yet. They're learning skills. So waiting. Yeah. Awesome.
So let's shift gears and talk about childproofing in general. It isn't a sexy topic, of course, but it is one that many parents think about. And, they might register for a couple outlet covers, and think they call it a day. But research indicates that many parents, grandparents, and others that have children visiting their homes don't go far enough with actively childproofing their homes. What pieces do you recommend parents take seriously, and when should they start?
That's a great question. When I was teaching home safety and childproofing classes, I always said to parents, I said the best way to understand the hazards that are in your home are to get down on the floor and roll around, crawl around, see everything from the perspective your little one does. And the best time to childproof is before they are mobile. Because you think, oh, I have time. Well, when they're mobile, you really are chasing them around and you don't have as much time. So the first thing would be, get down on their level, see what's there. Outlet plugs, doorknob baffles, locking the cabinet.
That's what they're called? A baffle?
A baffle.
I never knew that.
Yeah. And now they have all kinds, to go over all kinds of handles. It used to just be the round doorknob covers. My mother still can't overcome the doorknob thing. So they're also adult proofing for some. But, everybody kind of knows about those things, toilet locks and, cabinet locks, and putting any dangerous chemicals out of reach, locked away, out of sight, out of mind, but also locked. The magnet locks are great if you put the magnet out of reach.
Right.
Right.
So, but beyond that, I think people kind of think, okay, I did what I'm supposed to do. But there are a lot of other things that parents either don't realize are a hazard or don't think are a serious enough hazard that they need to do anything about it. And I've met a lot of parents who have lost children to things they didn't know were a hazard. They thought they were doing the right thing, but they didn't have all the information they needed. So one of the things I tell people to consider is window coverings. There is a law that has been passed that in the United States, starting next year, I believe, you can no longer purchase corded window blinds.
Oh, that's great.
Oh,
blind strangulation, but that doesn't account for all the blinds that are already in everybody's home.
sure.
And what people think they're supposed to do is, right, wind up the cord and put it out of reach. However, most blinds have cords in between the slats.
Right.
And kids can strangle on those.
Hmm.
And they have. So I would say if you have corded blinds in your home, consider replacing them with a either cordless version or a shade or something that doesn't have any cords at all. There's a great website. It's called Parents for Window Blind Safety. They also have a Facebook page, and Linda Kaiser founded it. She lost her daughter to a cord blind strangulation, and she's been working for 20 years to get this law passed.
Wow.
And we've all done that, right? I did the little cord winders and thought I was doing the right thing, getting them out of the way, and we just didn't know. So that's one that I think gets overlooked. Baby gates, I think people use, but it bears mentioning, never use a pressure gate at the top of stairs.
Right. Meaning if you're going to put a gate at the top of the stairs, it needs to be hard bolted to
Correct.
the woodwork, not one that a kid could push over. That is something that is super important.
Yeah. And a lot of people, now you can get the baby gates that have the pet door. Most toddlers can fit through the pet door.
Oh, geez.
So that as well. And that's true for pet doors going outside, going to basements, things like that. If they can't be locked, that's something that a lot of people don't realize. Or they'll get their head stuck in there if they can't fit all the way through. So that's something. Another thing that you mentioned in the beginning is drowning. So people think, oh, I need the toilet locks. I'm not going to leave them unattended in the tub. Excuse me, I'm not going to leave my bucket of water what I wash the floor with out. But now, especially with the pandemic and people spending more time at home, drownings are increasing because people are doing staycations. They're going to the local lake, or they're going to the beach, or they're getting a pool, or they're using a pool. And I have a friend who lost his son on the 4th of July to a drowning in their pool. They were in the pool. He came in. Dad had to use the bathroom. His son was sitting at the kitchen table, wandered back outside, fell in the pool. Literally in the time it took Dad to use the bathroom, his son drowned. It happens so fast, like in less than a minute. And it's often silent. So there's the issue of kids wandering off and falling into the water and not being able to get out. And then there's the bigger issue of vast majority of drownings happen within 10 feet of a parent.
Yes.
Wow.
A lot of people think that drowning looks like kids are going to wave their arms and scream like on Jaws, but drowning is often silent. If you think about, if you've ever been to the ocean, I used to go to Rhode Island beaches when I was a kid, and the waves are insane. And there was a number of times that I was so dangerously close to not being able to get back onto the beach. And when that wave that hits you and you're trying to get up, but you can't get your head above, and you start to panic, You're not screaming and splashing around. You are desperately trying to use all of your energy to just get your head above water. And so it's something that can happen, like you said, right with the parent right there, right next to you, thinking they're diving down to get rings or they're dunking their head. And in reality, they're struggling to get back up.
It's true. And the other thing is like hot tubs and pools that have, you know, the suction valve in the pool, especially girls with long hair, their hair can get stuck in it and it holds them under. It's not common, but it does happen. So always making sure that your hair is in a cap or not long for the girls or boys if they have long hair, for sure. So how can you prevent that? Door alarms if you have a pool. So multi-layers. Put a sound alarm on your exit doors, all of them, even if it goes out the front and the pool's in the back. You can get a pool alarm that goes in the water that will sound whenever anything goes in. So if an animal falls in, if a child falls in, it will sound. You can also, you know, if you have a in-ground pool, make sure you have appropriate fence around it. Make sure the fence has a child lock and don't leave anything near the fence that kids can climb on. For above ground pools, a lot of times they have stairs that you can flip up. I've seen so many kids scale those.
I saw a video online last year that just absolutely, that's one thing I'd like all parents to be that are listening to know, is that your kids will be capable of things you never even thought possible at ages you never thought they were old enough to do, and things that you didn't even realize could be done, right? Like I one time walked in on my son. He had moved a chair over to the counter, climbed up onto the chair, climbed up onto the island, and then hung from the pot and pan rack. Now, I didn't know he could do any of those things. I didn't know he could move the chair. I didn't know he was smart enough to do that. I didn't realize he could get up on it and then get up on, you know what I'm saying? Like, and then even the thought of, hey, I'm going to hang from this. I was like, ah! So all those pots and pans had to come down for a while.
Yeah.
So they're going to do things that you didn't even think that they could do, or that they're just smarter than you ever could think.
Yeah.
The other thing too, Kim, you said something that I love, and I actually had written it down beforehand, but you said it, was to get on your hands and knees and crawl around and look for things and go slowly. And that is such a great idea. But another way to also, in addition, I'll say, is to invite another kid over who's older than your kid. And they will find stuff that
absolutely,
you know? And sometimes it's even a kid that's the same age. Like they are going to do stuff that your kid never did. And so childproofing for their friends who might come visit is also important. I had Kim, you remember my old house had a lot of cabinets that were nice and low, not just in the kitchen but in other places. And there was this little boy that came over for a play date, and not only did he climb up on the couch and stand on the couch, which my daughter had never done, but he started opening up cabinets and drawers that were at his level that my daughter had never, ever tried to do.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, no, of course, you know, he shows her what to do. And now she's like, oh, I want to do that now.
Oh, yeah. That's always, I hate when that happens at play dates. Like, my kid didn't even think to do that.
Right.
Show him. Now there's a whole new world.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to do it for sure. And it's true, you know, kids learn from other kids and they learn quick.
Yes.
And sometimes they learn just by what they see, you know, maybe you think they're not paying attention to the television program you're watching, but they see something there and they're like, oh, I can do that.
You're watching the Avengers and they're like, oh, I can throw something over my head.
I can jump off the couch and fly.
Right.
Yes, we used to call it couch jumping. And I actually removed all the furniture from one of my rooms when my twins were young, because that was the safest thing to do. Because no, please don't jump off the back of the couch wasn't working.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes you have to go to extremes to keep them safe. That room was completely childproof, but it had nothing in it but their toys.
Yep.
And you know, it was gated off and everything, but it had a couch once upon a time, and eventually the couch got back in there. But for that period of time, although it was an inconvenience and it wasn't aesthetically pleasing, and we had a couch in our kitchen, it was what needed to happen to keep the kids safe and help me keep my sanity as a mom of 3 kids under 3.5. You know, it was just, you know, what you had to do. So I think some parents try to make their kids fit their mold. And sometimes when you have little ones, you have to expand that vision and say, okay, I need to let them show me how I need to change right now to keep them safe and protect my stuff I care about. And it's not going to be forever. You know, it's probably a couple months, maybe a year or two, you know, but it's definitely worth it. My couch is back in my living room. They don't jump off of it anymore. It's fabulous. But yeah, definitely. And I think that, Jeanette, that's a really good point about your child proofing, not just for where your child is now, but where they're going. So yes, you can start low, but as soon as they start to crawl, they have a whole new level. And then they can pull themselves up. And then next thing you know, they're cruising. And then before you know it, they're climbing. And that can all happen really quick. So really, once they can roll, they're on the move. They can get places.
People often wait. They're like, oh, I'll wait till they do it. I'm like, no, you have time now because your child is not moving or your child is still inside you. Like that's the best time to get all this done.
Yeah.
And I remember many, many years ago when I first knew you, there were like 2 companies that you could call and they would come over and do childproofing. And then there was one, and then there were none because the liability was too big, right? So it's such a pain because you have to do it yourself now.
Yeah, there is still a professional childproofer in Massachusetts.
Ooh.
I can send you the information.
Ooh, nice.
I think they changed
them busy.
The business, so I don't want to quote the wrong thing, but I have it, and I've met him, and he's wonderful.
Okay.
He took over from someone else. It was Safe Beginnings.
Yeah, that's right. I remember.
I'm not sure if they kept the name. You might have.
Oh, we can put it on the resource page, babiesincommon.com resource page. That'd be great because sometimes it doesn't get done because it seems like an overwhelming task that you just don't have time to do until it's too late, right? But just as we were talking about throughout this show, it's something that's so important, and you're not going to realize it was important until something bad happens. We don't want that something bad to happen.
Right. And that's what I was going to say is a lot of times, you know, parents, so I'll wait till they're doing that. Well, sometimes the first time is the time that they get injured or God forbid, you know, get killed the first time they do something. So you want to try to obviously prevent those things from happening. So, you know, you're thinking 6 months, a year, 5 years down the road. And then once, you know, oh, you know, I don't have to worry about the cabinets anymore. Don't take the latches off, right? My kids are now 18 and 21. I'm leaving them there because someday I'm probably going to be a grandmother. I'm not ready yet. They've been well informed. But right? As a parent, I want my house to be just as safe as it was. It probably safer because I know a lot more now than it was when my kids were little.
Well, you also don't know, like when you have a party, somebody might bring their kids over and now you're all enjoying yourselves over at the grill, and then their little kid happens to be in the kitchen, and those parents might not be paying attention as much as you might have.
Right.
And so our standards of watching over our children are also different. And as people start to get to know other families with children, they start to notice that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you used to teach CPR and safety classes, so you've always been fascinated and interested in safety. And you, as a licensed physical therapist and a CPR instructor and a first aid instructor, like clearly before you had your first children, right? No, your second set, right? Yeah. So you had 1 child already, and then you had 2, you had twins. You had already known so much about this that you had child-proofed your entire home, and still something happened. So can you share your story? I know you've shared it many times before.
Yes, and I'm sure some of your viewers and listeners probably know the story as well. But so my older son Kyle was my first, and he was the one that sort of inspired me to become a childbirth educator and a birth doula. And you know, obviously the aspects of teaching about newborn care and home safety were passions of mine to begin with. I was that mom that went over and above. Like, you know, everybody's like, really? You're going to do that? You don't need to do that. You know, I mean, if there was a childproofing gadget, I bought it, I used it, you know, my house was, I thought, like Fort Knox. And then I had twins, and, you know, even more, because new products came out, used all those. But when Meghan was 3, she managed to tip her dresser over on herself. It was in December, actually a week before Christmas in 2004, and it happened while we were all sleeping. We don't know what happened, obviously, because she can't tell us, but we assume she was getting her clothes out because they were all over the floor, and you know, trying to get herself dressed, and we were still sleeping. It was very early in the morning, and it fell on her on a carpeted floor, so none of us heard it fall. And she suffocated. She wasn't able to cry, you know, underneath the weight of her dresser. She couldn't get out. And when my husband went to get her up in the morning, he found her. It was obviously traumatic, but at the same time, I couldn't understand why, as a mother, as a childbirth educator, as someone who read books and all the baby magazines and parenting magazines, why this wasn't something I knew about. You know, I said, yeah, I get it. If it's really tall, heavy, obviously unstable furniture, maybe it would fall. And we actually had one really tall bookcase inadequately secured to the wall because it looked like it was unsteady. But her dresser was small. It weighed at least 150 pounds. She weighed 28 pounds. And it didn't look like it took 2 adults to move it. Like, it never crossed my mind that it could tip over. But yet physics, right, is what did it. So
because the back of the dresser was made of really thin particle board,
right,
so it's only 3 sides. So it's not top heavy, it's side heavy.
It's front heavy.
Front heavy, right?
Yeah.
Front side.
So yeah, it was a very well made dresser. It was made by Ragazzi. It was part of a juvenile furniture set.
Mm-hmm.
It was maple. So the top was maple, the case was maple, the drawer fronts were maple, but the back was pressboard. And that's how most dressers are made, for sure. So, you know, she basically opened the drawers in just the right configuration, and she stood in or on or pulled in just the right way that it caused it to tip, and she wasn't able to get out of the way. So that night, Meghan's hope was born. My advocacy now has been going on for 15 years. So it started with emails, which Jeanette got, and a website that was pretty rudimentary back in 2004. I had barely learned to use email. Things have come a long way. But and that's been a tremendous help to, you know, all of this, to getting information out to parents. It's a lot easier to do now than it was, you know, all those years ago. But it started really as a grassroots advocacy campaign. I wrote to the Consumer Product Safety Commission and asked them why I didn't know about this. Because of course I started to do research and found out that this was an issue that they knew about. They had a safety alert. They said that, you know, 5,000 to 8,000 children every year in 2004 had been injured. There was actually
furniture tip overs.
That there was a committee that had been formed that was looking at developing a safety standard in 2000. So I got a little agitated. I wrote letters to the CPSC, to Congress, to furniture store owners, to Lowe's, to Home Depot, you know, saying, help me here. And I really thought that Meghan's death was a fluke. I thought we were the only ones it happened to, that surely if I told people about it, they would be like, oh my God, that's ridiculous. We want to fix this, you know, and manufacturers were gonna, yes, we don't want this to happen. We'll make safer furniture, and yes, we'll sell anchors so you can anchor it to the wall and it won't happen to your child, but that's not what happened. I didn't get replies from any of the people in Congress I wrote to, except for Congressman McGovern, who I met with. Didn't
But
hear
isn't he your congressman?
he is, yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's at least your congressman did.
I
But
know,
still,
thank
that's
you.
crazy sad.
But fast forward a little bit, I'll tell you
Mm,
more about the
mm,
progress we've made.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But you know, it was really difficult to get people to care. And that was really frustrating to me because I'm like, if I'm that mom and my child still died from a preventable accident in the home because I didn't understand that it was a problem and I didn't know that I could have done something to fix it. You know, I've long said $5 and 15 minutes to buy an anchor strap and secure it to the wall would have saved her life and would have saved, you know, 459 other children who've died since from furniture tip over. So I channeled that anger and frustration into advocacy and, you know, word of mouth, safety fairs, media interviews that started out being local and then national and now international. And now every time a tip over happens, my inbox lights up with requests for interviews because people know that I'm comfortable speaking about it.
That must be both awesome for your organization and but also really upsetting that it just keeps happening, right? Like
Yeah.
in a way, I think you'd probably love to be out of business in a, not that it's
I
a
would love
business, but you'd love to be able to close down your nonprofit and everybody would just know
I
to
would.
secure their furniture. So,
You know,
wow.
and I say that every time I speak to Congress or to the Consumer Product Safety Commission or any of the committees that I sit on, or when I present to physicians or any organization, I say, you know, if you had told me 15 years ago, I'd still be standing here begging you to help me educate people to make safer furniture and to teach people why and how they need to anchor their furniture to protect their kids. I would have told you you were nuts. There's no way it would take that long. And we have made very little progress.
Wow.
Because you think that our government is all benevolent and that if people hear that these things are bad for you, like chemicals that are in makeup or furniture tip overs, that you could simply just have a law that would require everybody to know that they, not only the furniture manufacturers would sell the furniture with the things attached to it, like in the box, so you would have it all ready to go, but also that you would be able to make sure that all parents knew that they needed to do this, right?
Yeah.
And it's not that simple.
It's not. I've learned so much about that. So
yeah, we talked about in our sleep episode about how even products that are made specifically for babies, like placing babies in, do not have any laws in this country that require them to be tested for safety before being put on the market. And only once a number of babies die do they even get recalled. And the number of babies that have to die is really, really high.
yeah.
That seems morally and ethically incredibly wrong.
And I'm working very hard to change that with a couple of really wonderful advocates that I've connected with along the way. Way back in 2005, with the help of Congressman McGovern, we introduced the first ever furniture tip over safety legislation. It was
for the whole country, the first ever.
Yeah, it was the Katie, Elise, and Meghan Agnes.
Yeah. So I'm going to say it again, the Katie, Elise, and Meghan Agnes Act, if anybody wants to look it up.
So it was named for Meghan, and Katie was another little girl who died from a wardrobe tip over about a month after Meghan did. And her mother and I connected, and they worked with their congressman in Pennsylvania, and we worked with Congressman McGovern. So that was introduced in 2005, and then again in the next session of Congress in 2008. It never got out of committee, but it did get the attention of the Consumer Product Safety Commission, the Consumer Union, and the ASTM, which stands for the American Society for Testing and Materials. And they are primarily responsible as a large international group for creating voluntary safety standards for all manner of products, not just juvenile products, but everything from, you know, the microphone that you're using today to, you know, the parts that are in your car to the thermometers everybody's using to take their temperature every day. You name it, there's probably a voluntary standard for it. And they constantly create new standards and they update standards based on data and reports of injuries and deaths and, new technology, all of that. So the bill didn't get out of committee, but it did get some momentum to tip over awareness and moving forward with that standard. In recent years, I've collaborated with other parents who lost children to tip overs. We formed a coalition in 2018 called Parents Against Tip Overs. And we found that we were basically all doing the same thing in our geographic area, but we weren't getting the national reach that we needed. And people around here, quite frankly, I'm old news. This happened 15 years ago. The media doesn't want to hear my story anymore. They want a fresh face. They're like, oh, well, that doesn't happen anymore. Or now it's just IKEA, right? So there's this huge misconception that furniture is only unsafe if it's cheap, if it's IKEA, or you had to put it together yourself.
Now, speaking of IKEA, you were part of a show that was on Netflix, right? Called Broken. And there was one episode on furniture tip overs, and there was a bunch of interview material in that show from IKEA and them defending themselves or attempting to, and it was just maddening to watch.
Yeah, it really is. That Netflix documentary, Broken, when Parents Against Tip Overs, we call ourselves PAT for short, we were in DC in the fall of 2018. We met with all 5 Consumer Product Safety Commission commissioners, and the CPSC is in charge of overseeing consumer safety for the entire country. That's their job. They're responsible for issuing recall notices. They're responsible for alerting the public when there's a potential hazard, product hazard. And they also receive reports from people when you experience a hazard.
But aren't they the same people also that won't put out a recall until multiple children have passed away?
I will get to that in a minute. And you can blame the Reagan administration and Congress.
Okay.
Remind me if I don't circle back to that. But the Netflix documentary, they followed us. So they were able to record basically what we were doing to advocate for furniture safety. And then they really focused more on IKEA than we wanted them to. We didn't realize that was the goal, was that it was going to be about IKEA. 3 of the moms that are in Parents Against Tip Overs lost their children to an IKEA tip over. So that was part of kind of what inspired them to involve us in the documentary. And we also, during that trip, met each other for the first time, which was amazing and emotional and powerful. We were able to go to the Astm Furniture Safety Subcommittee meeting, and we've all joined as voting members. So this committee is tasked with developing the Voluntary Furniture Safety Standard for all manufacturers of furniture. But because it's voluntary, they don't have to follow it. And right now, the standard is written that if a manufacturer produces a clothing storage unit, that's how they define it. Anything that could be construed as something you would store clothes in, so dressers, wardrobes, chests of drawers, those sorts of things, that are 27 inches in height or above, they need to pass a 50-pound weight test. So the way they do that is they put the dresser on a concrete slab. They say, oh, look, it didn't tip over. Test 1 passed. And then they open the top drawer and they very carefully put a 50-pound weight over the front of the drawer, and they very carefully back away and they say, oh, good, it didn't tip over. And then they close that drawer and open the next one, and they do that. And then they close that drawer and open the next one. And if it didn't tip over, it's deemed safe.
On a very flat concrete.
Because that's how kids climb up on furniture.
But also
not engineers who can't figure that out.
Yeah.
But also carpeting, a lot of times near the wall, it has that little hump, right, before the baseboard. Yeah. So then that doesn't. Oh, it's hard.
So this committee didn't do anything for 17 years. We showed up. We actually got the height dropped from 30 inches to 27 last year. We're working on increasing the test weight to 60 pounds. And they were being really difficult. It's a very contentious committee. It's probably 10 consumer advocates and 75 furniture manufacturers. And
wow.
that actually go to the meetings. And then there's a bunch of people that can call in on the phone.
Sorry, you said 75 furniture manufacturers and their attorneys?
A lot of times their attorneys are with them or on the phone.
Oh, wow.
So what's the, I mean, is it, my grandfather always said, if you don't have an answer to a question, the answer is probably money. And I feel like that, may he rest in peace. But I feel like that's probably what's going on here, right? Like even adding like a 2-cent strap and one screw to like, to a package of a wardrobe that they're going to make, $250 off of is just going to cut into their stockholders' profits. Right. Is that what's happening?
That's largely it. And they have incentive not to make those changes. And I mean, I get it. And we've said to them, look, we understand you've got automation, you've got to change where the robot puts the safety sticker, you've got to change how you design and develop furniture. We get it. So let's make all the changes. Let's include the carpet. Let's talk about dynamic testing. Let's figure out how children interact with furniture and mimic that when we test. Let's account for the actual weight of a 5-year-old.
Sure.
Because most deaths to children from furniture tip overs happen to those 5 and under. They can happen and have happened to older children, but most are to 5 and under. So we're like, if we test to the weight of a 5-year-old, and I can't tell you how many times we've spent hours arguing over how much a 5-year-old weighs.
Oh my God.
And then, oh, look, the time. We'll see you in 6 months.
Right.
So it's really frustrating. So what we did was we talked to our congressional representatives and we said, we want a bill. So we created the Sturdy Act. Stop Tip Overs of Unstable, Risky Furniture on Youth is what it stands for.
Wow.
It passed the House with bipartisan support. It is now in the Senate and has bipartisan support. And Mitch McConnell doesn't want to hear about it.
Huh.
So representatives from PAT have met with Senator McConnell and, well, his office, not him personally. And we're trying to get him to at least let the bill be heard on the Senate floor and voted on. But if that doesn't happen, then we have to start all over in the next session of Congress. But the Sturdy Act basically would direct the Consumer Product Safety Commission to write the law that they could right now and that ASTM could take care of with the voluntary standard process, but they won't. So we basically went around them and we've testified in front of Congress. We've testified with the CPSC, and I'm very involved with the CPSC. They have a great website, and you can put this in the show notes as well. It's called anchor.gov.
Yep, I have that.
This is the Consumer Product Safety Commission, correct?
Yes.
CPSC?
Yeah, so they created that in 2015, and I was part of that process. I'm one of the Anchor It moms, so they did some PSAs with myself and 2 other moms.
And didn't one of them appear in the Super Bowl commercial?
That was the Make Safe Happen campaign.
Oh, Make Safe Happen. Okay.
Yeah, I was the spokesperson for Make Safe Happen. That was the one where everybody was upset because there was an ad about a child dying in
the middle of their joyous occasion of the Super Bowl.
Yes, I thought it was brilliant. I was part of the focus group for that ad, and I thought it was incredibly powerful. But people completely missed the point.
Right, so. And what a good opportunity to educate a number of people, right? Right. In a big event like that.
Yeah.
So that's a shame that people did not that missed the point.
Yeah.
You were going to say something about the Reagan administration?
Oh, yes. But before that, I just want to say, so the take-home message from my story is that furniture is not inherently safe. You cannot tell by looking at it if it's safe or not. You cannot tell by how much you paid for it, whether it's safe or not.
she's a wonderful speaker.
Sorry, phone never rings. Want to do that, Olga?
Sure.
Sure. The take-home message.
So the take-home message from all of this is you cannot tell by looking at a piece of furniture whether it's safe or not. It doesn't matter where you bought it. It doesn't matter how much you paid for it. It doesn't matter whether you got it as a hand-me-down and it never fell on anybody before. It doesn't matter if it's tall, if it's short, if it's wide, if it's skinny. You can't tell. You have to assume that it's unsafe because a child can interact with that piece of furniture 1,000 times. And 999 times, nothing's going to happen. But one time, the physics is going to be just right, and it's going to tip. And if it tips, it could injure or kill them. And it could happen while you are in the same room, and you can be powerless to stop it. You are not faster than gravity. You are not the Flash.
Well, also, if that piece of furniture is very heavy, you may not be able to get it off your child.
Right.
Or it may have just hit them in such a way that they're already injured, but it may also be, and also televisions too.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of times, televisions on top of furniture in children's rooms or in play areas, the dresser starts to tip, but the television falls off. And the way parents say to me now, well, I don't need to secure my TVs because they're flat screens and they're light. And I'm like, well, even if it only weighs 20 pounds, that's 2 bowling balls. So would you drop a bowling ball on your child's head from 3 feet high? Do you think that's not going to break their skull? And they're, oh, no, my daughter. I'm like, then secure your TV because it's like dropping a couple bowling balls on your kid's head. And it's harsh, but it's true. And there's no guarantee that a dresser is going to be safe, even if you see a child climb it and nothing happens. So, and kids don't even have to open the drawers. Kids have tip dressers over just crawling up the knobs like a rock wall, going up the side, jumping on it from a bed, just reaching for something, tippy toe, trying to get up. So you just don't know. And you don't know if that interaction is going to be the first one, the 50th one, the 2000th, like you don't know. So why take that chance? So the only way you can prevent it right now, because there's no mandatory furniture safety standard, is you have to anchor your furniture to the wall.
Do you have any product or companies that make good quality anchors, or do you have a way that people can do more research on it, or something they should look for when buying an anchor?
As a matter of fact, I do. If you go to meganshope.org, there's a resource tab, and I actually wrote a whole list of anchors that are available, aftermarket anchors that you can buy. They're not available in all stores, but you can certainly buy them online. Amazon has them all. I recommend in particular one called the Hangman. It claims to hold 400 pounds. It's a steel cable, and it's all metal parts. So professional childproofers will tell you try to avoid anchors that have any plastic parts because the plastic can become brittle and break over time. Also, cable ties, plastic cable ties are the only one I absolutely do not recommend because I personally had a set of those fail.
Wow.
And like only a couple months after I had put them on the dresser. So that was what was available after Meghan died. So we thought, oh, okay, this says it's for furniture safety. I will use these. And then Channel 4 actually came to interview me and they wanted to see what it looked like. So it was on my older son's dresser and I brought the cameraman in there and one of them was snapped. And I damn near had a heart attack on poor Joe Shortsleeve.
Which for those who don't know, that's literally his last name.
It is, yes. And he's lovely.
Yes.
He was a lovely man. But yeah, so those, the cable ties can, especially if they're exposed to the sun, They can break really easily. So I don't know if it broke because it just got brittle over time, if they weren't safe, if they sat in the package for years and there's a life expectancy to them, or if my son had been pulling on the dresser and it snapped.
Oh, wow.
And we didn't know, right? The next best kind of strap from childproofers' perspective is something with nylon webbing. So like Safety First makes one, Kidco makes one. There's one on my website called Safety Innovations that was developed by a childproofer, and that can be used for televisions or furniture.
Is Quake Hold still around?
Is what?
Quake Hold?
Quake Hold, they are. They're mostly in California, in earthquake-prone areas, but you can order them on Amazon and from their website.
I just remember they had good TV straps.
Yeah. Most flat-screen TVs now have little notches in the back, so now they make the straps for flat-screen TVs actually attach to a special place on the back of the TV. And then if you have wood studs, the part that goes into the wall really needs to go into a stud. If you're only attaching to drywall, you need the special kind of drywall anchors that butterfly once you put it through. But try to get it into wood if you can. And if you have cement or concrete walls, there are special drill bits and anchors that you can use for those as well. You just have to ask at the hardware store what to use. But that's really the only way to prevent
childproofing companies. We talked about before we started, but there used to be at least 2 or 3 in Massachusetts, and you were saying there's still 1. Is that something that there are in other states that you know of, like a company that will come out and do that? Is that pretty pervasive, that there's at least 1 in every state?
I don't know that there's 1 in every state. There's an organization called the International Association for Child Safety, and they certify professional childproofers. So you can go on their website, put in your state, and it will list professional childproofers in your area. It'll also list organizations that promote child safety and childproofing. So Meghan's Hope is part of their list as well. And actually, I presented at their annual conference last year, and it was really interesting to hear their stories and their perspective. A professional childproofer will do one of or both things. They'll come to your home and they'll do an assessment. So they'll look at your entire home or whatever rooms you want them to look at, and they'll go through it, and then they'll give you recommendations for what you need to do to childproof. And it can even be so far as to your bookcase doesn't have tempered glass, and that could break more easily. So you should consider, what you want to do about that.
So not just things that could tip, but even things like that could break.
You should put a gate here. You need to, think about this cord. You need to think about, here's what I recommend for the fireplace, like all kinds of floor to ceiling, wall to wall things parents don't necessarily.
It sounds like a home inspection to some. I mean, it is a home, but you know what
I mean?
It's
like a child home inspection.
Right, but wouldn't it be wonderful if that was part of every time you have a new renter or someone purchases a home, as soon as they're in their home, they need to have this professional childproofer who works for the town or the region or whatever, that this would be something that would be standard. So everybody would have to be told this, you have to fix it.
Yeah,
right?
It would be lovely. There just probably aren't enough of them to go around.
Well, if there was an organization that made it like a job, that's creating jobs. I just created jobs. Look at that.
Look at you job creator.
Amazing. Yeah.
So sometimes they'll do an assessment, but other companies might actually come and do the actual proofing for you.
They'll do both. So they'll come in and do the assessment, and they'll do the childproofing, or they'll do the assessment. They'll give you a recommendation of what to use, and you can install. Or they'll give you the list, and you'll say, well, I want this, this, and this, but not the rest. So, you can pick and choose, but if you feel like you're not sure what to do, or I might be missing something, or I don't have time, and you don't mind paying somebody else to do it, then they know how to do it right. They use products that they know have been tested. One of the big problems right now, especially on Amazon, is counterfeit products. So, Safety First makes a furniture strap. there are probably 30 other companies that make a furniture strap that looks just like it and sells it for less, even
Wow.
copied the picture,
Oh my gosh.
but they use inferior products. And I can't tell you how many reports that we, Parents Against Tip Overs, have gotten from other parents that hey, I bought this anchor and it didn't work. It pulled out of the wall. It pulled out of the dresser. I don't know if you saw recently, there was a nanny cam video from California, meteorologist Elise Carlson. She's been very public with her story. Nanny cam caught her 3-year-old daughter climbing on her very expensive, very wide dresser, and it tipped over and it just caught her foot underneath it.
Oh my.
But it caught the whole thing on camera. And she was incredibly lucky. And she didn't know that. She thought, look, I paid like $1,000 for this thing. It was really expensive. It was really heavy. It was a piece of, nursery furniture. I didn't know furniture could tip. Never heard of that before. So she's sharing the video. She's sharing her story. She's working with the CPSC as well. But these nanny cams are now picking up these tip overs. We've never had video.
Right.
And now we're seeing exactly what kids are doing. There was just another one that happened a couple weeks ago that I post these on Megan's Hope Facebook page. So you can go back and scroll through and see them.
That would be good to follow.
It was twins and nanny cam again. They were in their bedroom and it was a bookshelf, but it had 2 drawers in the bottom. It was an IKEA piece as well. And it showed one of them got out of bed, got into the drawer, got out of the drawer. The other one got out of bed, got into the drawer, got out of the drawer. They opened it, they closed it. They both got in. It tipped over on both of them. And by the grace of God, they ended up between the shelves, so they didn't get hurt. They were in the space between the shelves, and when it fell all the way down, you heard them screaming, and like that terrified scream. You saw their parents come running in, throw the thing off, pick them up. Oh my God, are you okay? And they weren't hurt, thank God. But it pulled out of the wall with one anchor attached to the bookcase and one still attached to the wall. The anchors that came with the furniture. So they thought they were doing the right thing. They're like, look, it came with anchors. I'm going to anchor it to the wall. And then it didn't work. So the other piece that people don't realize is even though some furniture now comes with anchors, those anchors are not tested.
Oh, geez.
It's
like a Pandora's box here, Kim.
Yeah.
You're killing me here.
But
there's something else. It's not even tested.
No, it's not. And I've been screaming about that for years. But
I bet you have.
I'm on that Astm committee. We just met last week, and I'm like, we need a dynamic test. And we need to test all those anchors that are sold on Amazon so we know what works, what doesn't, at what point does it fail, how much weight does it take, how much force does it take. I'm not an engineer, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out.
Yeah, but isn't your husband an engineer?
He is, yeah. I asked him a lot of questions.
Well, I remember like IKEA furniture, the last piece I bought, I have to admit at some point I bought one in the last few years, but it comes with some sort, and even years ago, it came with some sort of attachment, but it would only work in like a European home. It wouldn't work in New England because, I'll just say New England. In New England, we have baseboards.
Right.
Pretty standard in every home. And so you can't attach that furniture with the ones they got because they were very, very thin and they had to attach flush to the wall. Yeah. And the furniture couldn't sit flush to the wall in any of our houses.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So even like that might have been useful, those pieces, and IKEA might have claimed we send home, these anchors, but they don't work in American houses.
Right. Yeah. It's true. And the other thing is, they send really shallow screws.
Yes.
So when you think about it, has to hold all this weight, and this much of the screw is actually in the wood because it's not long enough. That's part of the reason they fail. So, that said, my recommendation is don't use the anchors that come with the furniture. Go buy an aftermarket anchor and use that, and realize you might need to use 2 packages of them if you have a particularly heavy piece. You know, assume that 2 straps are going to hold at the most 200 pounds, if that. And 200 pounds has to account for the weight of the furniture, plus what's in it or on it, plus the force of a 50 or 60-pound child pulling on it.
Right.
So, right, that's going to be more than their actual weight. So when you're thinking, how much do I have to protect against? It's all of that added up together.
Another thing that I learned for a long time, it seemed like people were resistant to attach them because of aesthetic reasons.
Yes.
Because you want to put it behind, like your instinct is, I want it behind the piece of furniture so we can't see it, but you can't tighten it and get it snug enough to be safe. I mean, I guess it doesn't have to be super safe because you want to just prevent it from tipping up over all the way, but still just to get your hands and arms in there to do what it needs to do and to attach in the right spot and to make sure the piece of furniture is lined up so that the hook can line up or whatever thing you're using is hard. And so often the easiest way and the safest way to attach it is having it be above the piece of furniture. And it was fascinating for me to do this with my own kids' stuff. Well, I'm like, oh, duh, I'll just put like a lamp or a stuffed animal or a plant in front of that, and then we don't see it, you know? Exactly. So I think we don't think that one step further of like, oh, it's okay if I see it because I can just put something on that surface, you know?
Right. And, you know, a lot of times, like the hangman strap I talked about, it's about 5 or 6 inches long. But it's just that, you know, the furniture might move a little bit. It might tip an inch or two, but it's not going to fall. And maybe the top drawer will slide out a little bit, but that's not going to kill somebody. And you can still put drawer latches on as another way, but those can often be overcome. And not the latches that go inside the drawer, the ones that go on the side and the front.
Okay.
Those are a lot harder for children to overcome than the kind that you have to push down to open the door, you know what I mean? But that's another layer, but that shouldn't be the only layer. So I think you have to anchor it to the wall, plus good idea to do the drawer latches as well.
What are the statistics on this at the moment of how many kids are affected?
So the CPSC publishes a report every year. We know that these numbers are largely underestimated because they get their data from only 100 emergency rooms in the United States. And
why would that? Why?
Let me tell you,
every birth in the entire United States is required. Now that's a whole other fascinating thing, is what gets put on the birth certificate. That per state is not standardized too. So I know there's like, but it's like legislation has to happen in order for these things that are common sense to make happen. I know. It's ridiculous. Crazy, like 100 hospitals is all the reporting on. Wow. Right. It's called the it's nice something injury surveillance program. I can't remember exactly what the acronym stands for off the top of my head, but they've contracted with these 100 emergency rooms that are meant to be representative. So some are large trauma centers, some are little community hospitals, and they all report their injury data to the Consumer Product Safety Commission. And then they do some number crunching and extrapolate and, you know, estimate what the actual numbers are. And then they also get reports from parents like me, you know, like when I wrote to them and said, this happened to my child. And they take that information and add it to their database. If a death certificate says what the cause of death was related to. So Meghan's actually said positional asphyxiation due to a fallen bureau. So that would have gotten captured. If it just says blunt force trauma or asphyxiation, it doesn't get counted as a product hazard. So that's part of the problem. And I've done a lot of presentations lately to pediatricians, to the Department of Public Health, to Department of Children and Family Services. And these are people who are in a great position not only to educate about child safety, but to report when there's been an injury. Even if it's just, you know, oh, yeah, you know, I was using this, you know, whatever, pack and play, and the side collapsed, but, you know, well, that's a product hazard that could in someday cause an injury or a death. And that's how we end up with recalls.
But if people don't know to report them or how to report them or who to report them to, they don't get captured. So all we have to go on are these 100 hospitals. So the current statistics for tip over are that about every 24 minutes, a piece of furniture falls on somebody in the United States. Most of the time that's a child. About every 42 minutes, a child is seen in an emergency room for an injury related to a furniture tip over. And about every 12 days, a child dies. There's been hundreds, they've been keeping these statistics now since 2000. There's been hundreds of thousands of reported injuries. There have been 459 documented deaths. There have probably been way more injuries that never got reported or captured. There's probably even been deaths that weren't captured. And I'm very rare in the sense that I talk about it and I advocate to the level that I do. So myself and my other PAT parents, we say that when we speak and when we share this information, please realize that we're speaking for literally thousands of other parents who either aren't able to, don't know how, or are afraid to. A lot of parents, when this happens, when tip overs happen or a child's death to a product hazard happens, they get investigated. The police investigate.
Right.
The Department of Children and Family Services often comes in. Sometimes other children are taken out of the home until the parent's cleared. Can you imagine grieving a child and then having someone come in and take your other children away with no evidence that you did anything wrong? They just don't understand that furniture falls on kids.
Well, I'm sure there's also, I would be curious, I don't know if this is tracked, but I would imagine there's also a racial
there is
divide there, that happens way more often with people of color, which is also not acceptable.
But to be fair, it's happened to a lot of my white affluent friends.
Sure, yeah.
But I think there is a bias, unfortunately.
Wow. All right.
Well, thank you for doing the work that you do, because it's, it's a way I'm sure to keep Meghan's memory alive, but it's certainly not an easy thing to do. And also considering that there is so much red tape and, bureaucracy and politics and, people that have motivations other than saving children's lives and keeping children safe. And for people like us on this call and those listening who work in this field and have children or love children, or, that's particularly hard to hear. So thank you for doing the work that you do. And I hope that everybody takes this very seriously and visits Meghan's Hope. And also things like anchorit.gov, which we've talked about, and childproofingexperts.com, or even the cpsc.gov. And it's important that we all take the time and the money to do this, because nothing can replace the life of your child.
No, absolutely not. One more thing I wanted to mention, and Jeanette, this is what you reminded me about. So recalls. Recalls are complicated. And I didn't understand this until I got, involved in it up to my eyeballs, quite honestly. And I was shocked when I learned what I'm about to tell you. So the Consumer Product Safety Commission was created to protect consumers. And back in the Reagan administration, they felt like they had too much power. They wanted to abolish the agency entirely. They didn't think it was necessary. So instead of doing that, they basically put a gag order on them. So when they get reports of product hazards or injuries or deaths due to a product, they all get together and they talk about it. And when even one death happens, they should, and for the most part, want to, although it is a very partisan organization, so there's that as well. But for the most part, when it's been identified that yes, there's this injury hazard, and we need to notify the public, they can do one of two things. They can issue a safety alert, which who knows where that goes because nobody sees it. The media doesn't care. Parents don't know where to look. Like, nobody knows. Or they can issue a recall, but they have to contact the manufacturer. So in the case of IKEA, we had all these reports. I believe there were 3 to begin with, reports of deaths from the IKEA mom dresser. And they reached out to IKEA and said, you have a problem. You should recall this. We would like to issue a joint recall. IKEA said no. At that point, the CPSC's hands are tied.
Wow.
They either have to wait and negotiate with the manufacturer to come up with what they want to do and say publicly about this hazard, or they have to sue them. And they don't have a big budget, and IKEA has a very large budget. And they sued them. It took years. And IKEA finally agreed to a repair program, not a recall. And that was where the Secure It campaign came from, and that they're selling anchors and, oh, we're doing the right thing. And then 4 more children died from the same dresser. And they went through the same rigmarole again and finally did the recall. But it's a clause in the Consumer Product Safety Act called Section 6B. And basically all it does is, hugely all it does, is require that in order to issue a recall, the manufacturer has the opportunity to do their own investigation and decide what is said and what isn't said about the product hazard. So the big one that's been in the news most recently is the Fisher-Price Rock and Play. So the CPSC knew of, I think it was 6, maybe 12. They first said 6, and then there were 12 reports of deaths that they have gotten from infants in the Rock and Play. You can request injury reports from the CPSC. They're public knowledge, but they redact all of the information. So Consumer Reports requested the information. They got it, but somebody forgot to redact the information, and they found another 30 some odd deaths.
Whoa.
From the Rock and Play. It's now up to 70 something.
Oh, wow.
And I've worked with the reporter who broke the story, and she does a lot of tip over reporting as well. And then I met a mom at a conference back in February who thought that her child died from SIDS. And she heard the story on the news about the Fisher-Price Rock and Play recall, which, by the way, they only recalled after Consumer Reports went public with the knowledge, and the American Academy of Pediatrics demanded that they recall after hiding that information.
But didn't they recall it because if it got wet, then it could develop mold or something? Like, that was the story?
That was part of it, but it wasn't all of it.
Okay.
Yeah. So they recalled it, and then this mom said, oh my God, she died in that Rock and Play. And I thought it was SIDS. And it was, then she's like, and then she's like, how come I didn't know? So she went from being a grieving mom because of SIDS and not understanding why her child died to Fisher-Price killed my kid because they knew about it.
Yeah.
And they continued to just sell them and resist the recall and, all of that. So that's what 6B does. The other problem with recalls is unless it's huge like that, the media doesn't report it. So parents don't know. So another CPSC website called saferproducts.gov, you can go to and you can look up a product to see if it's ever been recalled.
Oh, that's good.
So you can search by name, whatever it's stroller, high chair, whatever.
You are providing the most resources of anybody we have interviewed so far.
Yes,
And
I'm
I
super
challenge
excited
any
about
future guest. I challenge any future guests to come up with a list this long of great resources.
Most of them are on the meghanshope.org website.
Yeah.
But saferproducts.gov is where you can go to report a product hazard, to get information about product hazards, to find out if there's ever been a recall, and you can subscribe to a recall list, and you can get emails every time a juvenile product is recalled, every time ATV is recalled. Like, there are recalls every day.
The word juvenile reminds me that many products that we buy for babies and children will have some sort of like juvenile award, and there's all sorts of different
Parents'
awards,
choice, you know.
right? And what people don't know is that that has nothing to do with safety
Oh no, not at all.
at all.
Mhm.
It's not even popularity all the time. Like oftentimes it's how much money did that company pay somebody to get that award.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. Those little stickers mean nothing. For sure. So yeah, the
Yeah,
recall.
I'm waiting for the DockATot to be recalled.
The
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 DockATot.
DockATot.
Oh.
It's like $130 or $110. It's basically a
It
cushion.
might be even more than that. I think it's over 200.
Wow.
It looks like
There's
a
different
pillow
versions, yeah.
it looks like someone took a pillow and smushed the inside.
Oh.
And so it's just like it's essentially a fluffy pillow that you put
It's like
a
a dog
child
bed.
in.
It's like a dog bed, but
It
very expensive and for a baby. And because it's made for a baby, like of course, if you're in the room and you're watching your child meticulously, they might be fine in that. But
Right.
still, there's people who are putting it in the bed with them, which is not
Oh.
okay. You know, like it just
Yeah.
and then if I mention something about that, then I'm perceived as not being nice. I'm just trying to save your kid's life.
Well, and that's a great way to bring it back around, because a lot of parents resist things that go against what they believe. Parents still vehemently defend the rock and play. I'm never giving that up. My child never would have slept if I wasn't in it.
Yeah.
And we're like, why would you risk your child's life? Like, you don't know if your child's going to be the one that wriggles around and gets their airway blocked. I mean, all they have to do is drop their head and, they can obstruct their airway that way. So I always say to people, don't think it can't happen to you.
Yep.
It doesn't matter what it is. It could be cancer. It could be COVID. It could be suffocation. It could be a car accident, or it could be that your child died at the hands of a product that was defective, or because you didn't think you needed to do that piece of childproofing because the risk wasn't great enough, or your child doesn't climb, or I'm always with them. I'm sorry, you probably pee by yourself eventually. You sleep. You're not always with them. And when you think they're sleeping, they're not always sleeping.
Yeah,
that is true.
Almost every child that's died from a furniture tip over was either down for nap time, playing in their room by themselves, or their parent was literally right there. And just, even if they were watching them, there was a tip over caught on video, actually, a mom videotaping her son putting his clothes in the drawer. And it started to happen, and she threw the phone and stopped it. But she was literally sitting like from me to my laptop, doing it. So, you just can't think it's not going to happen to you.
And also, and we say it time and time again, once you know better, you should do better, right? So even if you use the rock and play with your first child, I had a child who didn't sleep. I was desperate for sleep. There were times where I would have sold my own soul to get him to sleep, right? And so no shame, right? This isn't a judgment or a shame. You shouldn't feel guilty that you did that. Thank God. Just be grateful. Thank God that nothing bad happened. But now that you know better, let's do better, right? Thank God my child wasn't one of those ones. I did what I had to do before I knew better. Now I know better and I can do better. And once you know, you can't unknow. So if you've listened to this podcast, now that you know, you can't unknow that these are things that are a problem, that there isn't a government agency that has the power to make sure these products are safe before they're placed on the market, that there are actual products out there that take a little bit of extra time and a little bit of extra money to get, but that can help save a life. And now that you know, you can't unknow. So please take, these resources, and especially if you're pregnant or have a young child before they're even moving, please, please, please anchor it. Please childproof. Please make it safe, because before you know it, they are on the move.
Yeah. And thank you, Kim, for sharing your story. And I know you've always been very vocal about it and willing to share and willing to talk about it. And I think that's so helpful, because many parents who have something so horrible happen feel like they can't speak up because they're too sad, or they feel afraid of being judged. I'm guessing here. I haven't spoken to all of them,
Absolutely.
of course, but then it's great that you are one of the ones who can, because now anybody who listens to this or watches this can say, oh, I actually saw somebody talking about when her own child died from this. It is real. Like, it brings it home that this is real. I went to Meghan's funeral, and like, that really hits home, but not everybody has a situation where they know one of the kids who passed away. And it's, at least you're getting out there. And it's sad that the media doesn't cover even just the positive side of, let's have a story about why positive. Like, doing childproofing is a great thing. We don't have to always interview somebody who has a sad story, but like, be positive about how can you be proactive. Like, I miss, I don't watch the Today Show too much anymore, which is really funny because I have a friend who works for the Today Show. But they have like those positive stories. So I'll have to ask her whether they've had anything on childproofing lately, but you probably would have heard about it if they did. So
thank you so much.
They did a story with Meghan in it, but it was years ago. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. So thank you, Kim. And we hope everybody will see babiesincommon.com/show or /podcast to check out all the other episodes that we have as well, and share this with friends and family members, especially grandparents, because they need to hear this stuff as well.
Absolutely. And I know that you learned a lot of helpful information today. So please don't be stingy. Please text a friend who's either expecting or parenting and tell them about this episode and our show. And if you want to laugh your stretch pants off while learning about childbirth, babies, and breastfeeding, please consider taking a live and interactive Zoom class with us, or tell your friends about Babies in Common. Virtual feeding consultations and a weekly feeding group called Breast Milk and Conversation is also available. And hey, if you go, you can tell all the other parents at that Breast Milk and Conversation group how you childproofed after listening to Kim's interview. So
I will bring that up at our next meeting.
That would be great. And if you follow us on social media, we're always posting great articles, videos, and resources to help you rock your birth and thrive as a new parent. Please also consider following Meghan's Hope on Facebook so that you can get some great information about other ways to keep your children safe.
Yeah, look at the website on meganshope.org for the resources. So our next episode will come out after July 8th. We are going to be talking with Professor Amy Brown about breastfeeding. She's a prolific writer, researcher, and an international speaker who is from Wales. I think it's, is Wales part of the UK? I always forget. I think it is, right? So we hope you'll check out that show. And we are a community for you. After all, we all have babies in common.
So
thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.